Next up, we have Francesco, who is CEO and running the Blender Foundation. Obviously, Blender is a huge part of our lives. Millions of Blender users. I think it's a really important part of the future of digital creation. And I'm honored that Francesco's been able to come here and talk about Blender. So please welcome him to the stage, and I'll let him take it from here. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. So good to see you.
Good to see you. So, all right. Hello, everyone. And thank you for having me. It's really, really cool to be here. I love this venue, I love the place and the vibes. Not everybody does. So I want to start with a little bit of a throwback. Because just a couple of days I was in Austin, Texas, for a Blender conference. And this is me in 2014, so even longer ago, having lots of fun building what would become the first crowdfunding campaign, a platform for the Blender project. We were working on ways to make the Blender project more sustainable financially already back then, because we were relying on donations, of course, but like, how do you make it so that you can pursue more ambitious goals? And so after a lot of working and having fun and dancing in the streets of Austin, we ended up launching the Gooseberry campaign website, which was basically this whole initiative with the Blender Cloud and this whole notion that we would be making a ambitious creative project and have Blender community to support it on a monthly basis in perpetuity, so that we could actually do it. Because just doing a fundraising once for a 6-month project and then like disassembling everything again, that's not like so sustainable. And in a way, like this is basically around the times when Patreon started. It was the same year. So in a way, it was pretty a pretty new concept at the time. Now it's very obvious. People do this a lot. So anyway, it was just like a little throwback because I was in Austin 2 days ago, so I had that. And together with the team, we went through a number of adventures, but most famously Blender 2.8, the growth of the project experienced during that time, and we went through a lot. And we've been also working on a very deliberate succession planning together with Tom, the founder and the original creator of the project. And we announced at Blender Conference 2025 last year a new Blender Foundation board, and to really create more sustainable and resilient organization moving into the future of Blender, because Blender has been around for many, many years, almost 30 years. So things were looking very good, and Blender is a very healthy, very active project. It gets downloaded millions and millions of times, 20+ million downloads a year. This is the one data point that we have that shows the amount of daily connections that people do to the Blender extension server. So there's an opt-in feature that people can enable. So this comes off by default, so people have to go and check the checkbox. And every time you launch Blender, like once a day, we do check on the server if there are extension updates, so like add-ons basically. And this is an indirect way for us to get a sense of how many people are launching Blender. So it's like 250,000 people doing that every day. Of the people who opt in, you can be pretty sure that some people don't. So, in a way, everything is well, and people have been asking, okay, so how is this new job as CEO treating you? Because it's the beginning of the year, that's what I'm doing, and this is me basically. So there could be a better time to actually start, like, kind of formally taking the leadership of the project, because it's kind of very dynamic times, and a lot of things are being put into question. I think being in the context of this conference, just seeing a couple of presentations, I had to quickly go back and remake my slides to kind of fit them a little bit more to the theme. So it's very interesting. So before we get into the details, into the main part of the presentation, I wanted to take a moment to celebrate 20 years of Blender Open Movies. So this is one of the core activities that we've been doing to grow the Blender project. And so while this is not the most efficient way to make content, the idea here is like that, the knowledge and technology that comes out of creating this kind of content is what benefits the entire community. So hopefully some of you might be aware of the fact that, for many, many years, Blender is really trying to tie creative goals with the technology development to really prove that then what we do is viable and it actually works. And the goal of this project was indeed to share not just the results, but also the solutions and to document the struggles along the way. And for the past few years, this concept has evolved further because it's not just about, many, 15 years ago, we would say, let's make a film with furry characters because there were no good hair system in Blender. And you would make Big Bang Bunny, and then you have hair, and then it's great. It's like the good old days, Or we need to do motion tracking because Blender doesn't have, visual effects workflow tools, so you cannot even do motion tracking or keying. And then you make a project, you add it, and you are successful. Nowadays, it's a little bit more complicated, and it's more about collaboration, working together, and building tools that enable people to work in a small team. And we do that by creating a lot of open source tools and integrating a lot of open source tools into this pipeline so that anyone can have like sort of a turnkey solution to actually build to build a studio, basically, because it's not just about Blender, it's about bringing people together. And, to the point, like, we push it pretty hard, like, to the point where you can have, like, a pipeline built in 30 minutes. This is like a talk we did at SIGGRAPH, like, last year, and it's not exactly a joke. Like, if you leave your opinions aside and you do not try to reinvent the wheel every time, you can actually, starting from scratch, you can actually get some pretty solid set of tools to work together with your small team and deliver something. And this has been definitely a focus of the project at large, besides Blender itself. Again, Blender Studio is the creative unit within the Blender team that makes a lot of this kind of content. In the past year, we've been diversifying things, and we made like an interactive project, like a little game. We've been working on some really high-end facial rigging training. We've been working on a music video together with the band OK Go, where they use facial motion capture to drive a real-time simulated generated video within Blender. You guys can go and look it up online, it's really fun. And the next month, we are going to release our next short film called Singularity, and I'm really looking forward for everyone to see this. Besides the artistic values on a technology level, I'm very excited because this is like a 4K HDR film. And the HDR part is very interesting because in Blender, we've been working on getting this end-to-end HDR workflow. So what you see in Blender, in the viewport, is that what you can really author and edit within Blender with your video editing tools and export and upload on YouTube or whatever other publishing platform. It stays fairly consistent, and you can keep seeing exactly the same HDR content all the way. So I think it's pretty unique. Like DCCs, it's a bit of a struggle to do this kind of advanced color management. And especially considering that everybody carries HDR devices with themselves, like some kind of content really shines with this. And so I think this was the kind of very good project because, as you can see from the visuals, it kind of really complements that. So when the artists were working on this, I really wanted to encourage them to pursue this as well. And it's coming out next month, so I look forward for you to see it. Hopefully you run into it. Nowadays there is a lot of content saturation on the internet, so it's that's why I give you a heads up. So you keep it in mind. The devices now read our mind, so then it will put it somehow in the algorithm recommendation. It's not just about saying it, right? I can say singularity, singularity, singularity. So now the phones have heard it. Next time you will. All right, and going back to Blender, Blender 5.0 was released in November 2025. It introduced a lot of upgrades to the color management, geometry nodes, a lot of viewport performance. Like, again, as I was mentioning, the HDR output, the continuous work. Like, Blender keeps growing. We are working on doing like series. So, for example, there is a 4.0 series, this is a 5.0 series, and it goes through a sequence of updates where then we have a 5.1 where we keep doing improvements. So the 5.0 is like you break everything, 5.1 you fix and improve things, and the 5.2 is the LTS, the long-term support. So something that then an artist that is working in production, in a series, in a studio, in a team, whatever, they can just take it, install it, and then just get regular updates on an almost monthly basis, only fixes for a period of 2 years. And this is a conscious effort that we do with the Blender project to not just be with the bleeding edge and the fast development, but also cater to the industry that actually relies on the software to create content. Another activity that we announced is the Blender Lab. And the Blender Lab is essentially a place for doing experiments. And I just want to highlight a couple of them. One of them is called Clay Pencil. This is a project that originally started from, from the community, from Daniel Lara. He's an incredible artist, and he's been playing with the idea of using geometry nodes combined with grease pencil to generate this kind of three-dimensional brushstrokes. And it's really, really fun. In the past, I've been using this also as an example in contrast to all the wacky, crazy stuff that you can do with Gen AI by kind of making the point that, okay, this is more parametric, it's less generative. And you can also achieve some pretty unique things while keeping the artist in control. So, and the reality probably as we are seeing in this, these past months is that there is a convergence, things are gonna come in the middle, but I think for Blender, this idea of enabling technical artists and not developers to build creative tools to achieve unique aesthetics, that's a very, very powerful thing. And that's a thing that we definitely want to keep pursuing. On a completely different front, oops, can we go back to the slide and play it back? Because I think it should play. Even if it doesn't play, it doesn't matter. It's basically, we've been working on bringing Blender beyond the mouse and the keyboard. So what do you do if you don't have it? What do you do if you are a 13-year-old and you don't have a computer because you don't? Now you have an iPad or you have whatever other tablet. That's like where a lot of the future of computing is too, in portability. And so making sure that Blender works well, excuse me, that Blender works well with these tools is very, very important. And Blender was designed in the 90s with keyboard and mouse in mind. So rethinking this is quite an ambitious goal. And of course, we're also talking about VR and XR headsets and so on. So that's like, both on the technology side, but also on the user experience side, a lot of things to think about. And of course, AI. So this is a slide from Blender Conference 2024, which basically Stone Age in AI terms. And we've been kind of from the beginning, because it started like already then, people are asking, so what is Blender going to do with AI? What is Blender going to do with AI? And it was every once in a while that people are asking, and then it increased in frequency. But at the time, it felt right already to put out kind of the statement, the position, so to make tools that empower artists, obviously to use it as a tool. I mean, this all makes sense, but it kind of highlights the point that we do want to take a little bit of a conservative or late adoption approach when it comes to the core of the Blender software because of the community and because of the extensibility that Blender natively offers, so people can already go and do all these experiments themselves. I mentioned before, like the generative tools versus procedural tools. That's also something really, really interesting to keep in mind. And of course, going beyond Gen AI, one topic that we've been working on, like more concretely, is an MCP server. And as a matter of fact, somebody built an MCP server the day that you could, right? So it's not that the world is waiting for us to do something. People already go ahead and do it, but this is something that we felt like, okay, it's a good first step. So as part of the lab, we are offering now this MCP server. It will be more widely announced later this month. And the idea here, like the way we communicate about this, is really to make it a natural language interface for Blender to carry out tasks, to learn about complex production setups. For example, with the current, Open Blender file, fix the names of all the data blocks and remove type loops, and report back on what you did. Or give me descriptive names for this data, or find out what is the heaviest object in the scene. Like lots of, annotate a node graph because I have no idea what is going on. Like these kind of things, they are definitely worth exploring. And there are also like maybe some more, something that Jules mentioned in his presentation, make me a little tool that allows to, when I press this button, perform this operation. And because of Blender's Python API system, you can do this live within the software. You can just write a little Python script, execute it, and you will get a new button in your interface. There is a lot of talk about the consequences of working with this kind of technology, the dark power of LLMs, and how things can go wrong. So this is not something that we are advertising that people can do, but this is definitely something that people will do. The presentation was also a little about, this talk is a little bit about also how does the Blender project work? Because, is this anomaly of this, fairly successful open source project, and how is it structured, and how do we do what we do? So I wanted to just show a couple of pictures of like conceptually how we see it, and also how then, what's the angle for people to get involved? Because getting involved is really like what makes the project possible over the years. So everything is, the project is that, Blender itself is at the heart of everything. And then you have, the makers. So these are people that are doing the work, designers, developers, technical artists, people that facilitate contributions, dev coordinator, module owners, etc. And then you have more like on the strategy, the vision. And so you have like more leadership, people that have been around for many, many years that have sort of a drive to say, okay, this is the direction where we go. But you definitely need buy-in from everybody. And the everybody is the Blender modules. The Blender modules is the structure with how the Blender defines itself. And there are like some general, more core modules. And it's 5 modules that are like that, and then 11 feature modules. And each one, they have their own members, they have their own owners, their own agenda, and they do regular meetings, and they report on their activities. So this is like the best way to get involved. And this is like where a lot of things are also found out about what's in the future of the project. It's not that there is someone in an ivory tower deciding this is where we are going. It's very much of a dialogue, and this is also where a lot of surprises sometimes come up. So that's where sometimes key contributors come up, because it starts from those very specific interests. So focusing on the future a little bit now, where are we going? What is going to happen? A couple of points about like the Blender strategies that to decentralize. So the decentralization of activities, this is like something that we do since the beginning. This is just like a picture that shows a bunch of marketplaces that sell materials and assets for Blender. Like Blender is not building its own marketplace that then is going to monetize to sustain itself financially. Because when you're an open source project that relies on donation, that's like sometimes considered a very obvious thing to do. And we purposely don't do that. We want to make sure that there is a broader economy around the software that then can trickle down to the Blender project. And this allows to achieve a much larger scale. The focus on interoperability is very important too. We keep working to make sure that Blender can play well along with whatever is in the creative ecosystem. Of course, Blender for us is the core, is the center, and as much as you can achieve within the tool itself, you should. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a world of interconnected data and tools. So, the OpenUSD is definitely something that for years Blender has been getting a lot of support also from the industry and has been dedicating resources for. OpenPBR shading, that's a project that we are pursuing this year to improve the quality of shader interoperability with different tools. And in general, it's all about like flexible and reliable data exchange in and out of Blender. Gaussian splatting is another topic that, again, like sometimes, the project itself, like we make the choice of be late adopters because there are already like 5 add-ons for doing Gaussian splatting. We saw today something in the keynote also that is Gaussian splatting. But until those things get like properly standardized and defined, the effort that it takes for the project to introduce them and then change them is too high. So then we just stay, we remain aware of these things, and then like we find the right moment to do it, which is part of it, sometimes a challenge. Control is a very, it's a keyword that has been heard a lot lately, especially with, new tools that sometimes seem to have a mind of their own. And in Blender, keeping to offer like a very deep access to data via the Python API, which is also by design, this is how Blender works. That's like a very important thing. So like the reason why a lot of people can create all these fun tools around Blender is because of the API system. So this interface that kind of shows and offers all the functionality that the tool has for then you to build your own solutions on it. And in general, making people feel like they are in control. And the Blender is a tool that you can wield. That's like part of the vision. And finally, I mean, in all this time where there is a lot of distractions and a lot of things that are happening, new things every day, we try to focus on what the mission is. And the mission is to bring the best 3D computer graphics technology in the hands of creators as free and open source software. And this is ultimately also about people. So no matter the technology, no matter the disruption, this is about people working together. So as long as we do that and we find a way together, then it's what the Blender project is all about. So thank you very much. Now maybe we can have a chit chat with Jules a little bit.
All right. Well, I believe I just heard that Gaussian splats that are part of USD and GLTF.
Yeah.
So that's good. They just need to make them reliable material properties. I'm so excited about the OpenPBR stuff because, well, obviously sort of Adobe pushed that on standard surface. We adopted it because it just feels like you don't want to have this kind of friction, and it's also closed. So, I mean, I think, what you guys are doing is fantastic. All those steps are positive, and there's a lot of changes happening, but I think I think adaptability is key, and I think you guys have that really, in a way that I don't see in a lot of the other people building tools in this space. So
yeah, I think especially the one of the important aspects of Blender is it can often position itself as a reference implementation for some technology. Sometimes it's a challenge because the fact that Blender is open source is somewhat an expectation that it just magically happens. So like that's part of also my job to make sure we talk to the right people to get the support to do it and to make it, to actually make it happen. But definitely the OpenPBR is a good example for that.
Yeah.
I think there is a big chance for Blender to be there, and then anyone can easily look really in the details. Because you put out a spec, and the spec is great, but then how does it actually work, right? That's usually a challenge. So yeah.
No, that's great, and it is interesting. You also have two sort of semi-competing formats, USD and GLTF, both of which Blender supports quite well. In fact, I think people round trip those formats through Blender. If you ask like Claude, for example, how to convert it, say, open a Blender, and but it is nice to have those pieces standardized. The other thing that I was mentioning in my talk earlier, and I know you're thinking about it, is the whole MCP around Blender, because it feels like it's starting with just a system. Like, I don't know every aspect of Blender. I have Claude tell me what to do, and then it can also fill those pieces in. But having that script for, agents to be able to leverage what your questions are, all these requests. I mean, are you guys looking to build that, or how is that working for you? Because it feels like Blender is an essential tool for that. I mean, every request that goes into the 3D space, if Blender is set up in the right place, I think it will go to the Blender stack. And I think it's already well positioned in this.
Yeah, I think especially there are skills, for example, or there are like workflows or tools that can be kind of used to complement MCP functionality. Like right now, we are starting really from the foundation, the basics, and then because even there, it's still almost early, right? So you have them. So one way to think about it is, now there are some operating systems that are working on centralizing an MCP, the MCP server, so they can more easily find and talk to each other, or the tools can talk to each other. So how much functionality do you actually put into the one Blender MCP versus having multiple tools that actually communicate with each other and make it more scalable? Because otherwise we end up having this Blender MCP that can do way more things that maybe it doesn't need to. And so I think that definitely this is a very, important first step to have this kind of official and to have it there, also to make kind of a statement that this is important to have. And then I want to find out as quick as possible how to interoperate the different MCP servers so that they can actually work and be more.
We're up for that. No, what's interesting is, we are living in a slightly different world than I thought we were in last December or October, because I've discovered, since I didn't install OpenClaw because I didn't want to have the craziness on my system, but Claude Cowork, it knows its way around many applications. It knows its way around code, and I feel like even without an MCP, you put Claude Desktop on there. I mean, it can work with these applications. So it feels like MCP is a script. It's just we're not in the API days, where everything had to sort of be in this lockstep sort of system. And I kind of feel like who knows where it's going to go, but it does feel like the more dimensions of freedom you have in these interconnects, the better. And also the deeper the understanding of the agents, however that works, is essential. But I feel like it is early, but it's also moving so fast. Like October was a different era before we saw so much code being handled pretty well by AI. And of course, you guys are open source. Like there's a possibility that.
So, one of the interesting things is that people, in Blender, as I was mentioning, like the late adoption, and also in a lot of the creative community, even the developer community, there is maybe you cannot call it necessarily a resistance, because resistance is futile, but
Star Trek reference for this.
but there is definitely a awareness and an awareness of this. And even in this scenario, though, I find it kind of ironic that because when you go online and search for something that is 3D, how to do this in 3D or any kind of information about 3D, these organizations that have scraped the entire internet, they must have a pretty skewed version of how the world works, because the amount of Blender information that is out there, the forums, the Stack Overflows, like all those questions that have been asked, there is so much info about Blender out there, and there is the API, and there is like so much documentation, like I think more than any other software like in this space, I think. So I think even while maybe not embracing it 100%, I think that all these tools, they already have so much knowledge about 3D because of Blender, even within the source code, that I think it is indeed very, I think is Blender is foundational in that sense, that is just there.
Yeah, I think it is a unique position. I think even if you do nothing, the fact that, I mean, I noticed when I was first testing, like how smart are the LLMs with 3D and stuff. I mean, immediately it's like, oh, let me do a Python script and load Blender in a Docker container and Blender, right? And it feels like it's like the lingua franca for machine learning, because all of this is so well documented. Not even just the fact that it's open source code, but just you have millions of users. Everything is out there, and I feel like this is in a really powerful position that I don't see other 3D stacks being in. And I think what I'm curious about is I feel like the future is you have a Python API, right? And you have vibe coding, and it's like vibe coding plugins is not a crazy thing. It's certainly easier than vibe coding a whole application. And I just see the future, like this year, changing. It's like, well, I'm already asking Claude, like, I want to convert this, this QuickTime movie into different frame rate, and I have no app that does this easily on my thing. I just said, if you have these kinds of things, the interface to Blender might become almost, built on the fly. I feel like that's sort of where the Python API might come in, and where these agents can be really powerful, because you do want to have interfaces that are designed around ideas you might have. I mean, that's really where like artists can also become technical designers too, and I think Blender is well positioned for that.
Yeah, I mean, Blender as a framework, like we try, is very interesting, because like obviously with Blender itself, we try a lot not to treat it like a framework, but because of its design, it can be used as such. And I think that in a way is like a consequence of having the tool designed well and being very flexible, and also kind of positions as well into the future to explore new things. So even just for prototyping and building, because here's one thing that I find very interesting is that, these tools, they help to accelerate them, but the 80-20 rule too. So, you can get up to a point, and then you really need to put in a serious effort. And this is like, I think is a rule of the universe, that, that it really works like that. And so I think the Blender giving you that place to be able to quickly build things and prototype and have fun, then you can actually really go in depth and make it like a solid, more sustainable, long-term running tool, still in the same environment. That I think is very, very valuable, and it will become more and more valuable in the future. I see other tools nowadays that are, without naming names, that they are prioritizing a lot the speed of prototyping, speed of adoption, speed of innovation. But then if you try to go like 6 months back in work that you did there, and you try to open or use it, it doesn't work anymore, because there isn't a lot of priority to make sure that that is there. And I think that the more professionals, or the more people actually really look into seriously integrating some of this technology into their workflows, these will just magically appear out of nowhere. Oh, I want to open my file from 5 years ago. Yeah, I mean, of course, by design you can. And you guys make production software, so you know what that means. But you see now, because there is this breakneck speed of making the new things, I can see also a lot of organizations and projects not really prioritizing that, which is a trade-off, right? And again, like just to say one last thing about this whole topic, we like Blender is there is a lot of players and there is like a lot of funding going around, a lot of investment, a lot of price. This is something that the Blender project doesn't have. Like we operate in a different way. We operate with a lot of community funding. We're a relatively independent small project. And sometimes I find it interesting that, people are asking, yeah, like OpenAI is doing this, or like, are you literally putting Blender and OpenAI in the same sentence? Like it's just like saying you're putting the, wheel of a bicycle with a SpaceX rocket. Like it's really two separate things. So we, in a way, that's also why the strategy of let's just see what people are doing and what people are building and making sure that they can. That's why we do that instead of jumping into it ourselves directly. So that's a little bit part of the mindset here.
Yeah. Well, I think my other question is, and this is the thing I think about a lot is, I think the idea, we're always going to have 3D objects, but they might not be meshes, right? They might just be these latent space, fuzzy things. And, the tools will still be there. I mean, you still want to directly control them, but they just might be very different than the kinds of solid, deterministic meshes we have now, like a latent space object, the stuff I was showing in my stuff, like that is definitely, it fits within a tool like Blender or any 3D tool, but it's not the typical ray tracing or even, the hard surface modeling kind of stuff that we're used to. How do you guys see that playing out?
I think this falls into the interop topic. Like to me, like getting flexible, like, powerful enough ways to bring in and out and represent different types of data. It's a big challenge. And this is definitely something we need to talk about more in the team about how do you make that work? Because one of the powerful things about Blender is that like it is a very coherent system that whatever you put in, you can kind of predictably manipulate and work with and integrate with whatever else you have. For example, in the case of Gaussian splats, like it's very different rendering technology. And I see like initiatives like the relighting and like that you can do things with it that's very, like I think that is very important to achieve. Otherwise, those formats and this kind of
who cares? It's like baked lighting otherwise.
Yes. So I think that's definitely something to pay attention to and to look.
Did you see the video that I showed earlier in Blender?
Yeah, I was here.
I was sitting. Oh yeah. I mean, what's great about that is that if you mix the ability to just pull out a Gaussian spot, because sometimes you just want that. Sometimes it is the best format for certain things, and you then set the baked lighting. You have all the materials, and that's why. Like we're still on those two standard brands. Like put at least the PBR materials, maybe open PBR now that we're all supporting it in this plat, because it's just it is a surface. I mean, even if there's a bit of transparency and an ellipse, it's like you can still have materials on there, and great. Like that's kind of what we're trying to rebuild that when we need to, but it should definitely be in the spec. And I think similarly, you can manipulate. I mean, maybe it's an SDF or something weird, but you can manipulate these kinds of fuzzy things. And I think that's where, like, if I had to imagine how to render like a latent space object that, well, you just run the modifier in latent space, but also the ray tracing is in latent space, and it feels like an SDF, right? Where it's like, you have these kind of functions that define surfaces. So, which we also did get working in Octane. Like, nobody uses it as much as I'd like, but it's there. It's there. I'm glad we did it because I love shader toy, and I wanted to be able to make sure you could at least load shader toy shaders. But that I think is going to be useful for sort of these kind of fuzzy types of objects or deformations that might be machine learning driven that might not be locked into the polygons.
For me, this is like all lab stuff. I think it's really like I think doing these kind of experiments and enabling, like I'm working to get more resources so that we can do this, and like without putting the the pressure on being like this needs to be in Blender tomorrow, but you can actually play around and have it and see it. So that's definitely something that I think we need to explore and try to make possible, and at the same time, really be. We have to really split the efforts, like making sure that we listen a lot to artists, what they want, and then like you try to anticipate what's in the future for them, because just ignoring what's in the future also that doesn't help. So I think that is definitely something that I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time in this year. But yeah, so I agree. I think it's definitely an interesting space.
I will say that I've gotten to know you over the years. Blender is in incredibly good hands. I think you have a great vision, and and Blender's changed the world. I mean, it's like we have a bunch of Lightwave artists that wouldn't have a tool if you or Bodo even. Like Blender they all moved to that, and it's great. I mean. And I think that you've done something really special. I would never have imagined like 15 years ago that it would have ended up where it is. But I think it's a testament to you and Ton and the great work that is being done there.
And to the whole community. But thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. Well, it was a pleasure having you here, Frederick. Thank you so much for coming here and being part of today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Round of applause for everyone for.
All right.